Hi, it's your NoBox co-creators here. This is Marthea.
This is Yejin. Thanks for listening to our podcast. We are beginning to prepare for season 2. Please subscribe to Dance Behind the Screen, and if you're listening in Apple Podcast, give us a 5-star rating and leave your comments in a review.
We have some really exciting announcements for NoBox. We are now accepting submissions for the first annual NoBox Dance Film Festival, NBFF for short. This is an international dance film festival that will premiere in Dallas, Texas, in the United States, and Puebla, Mexico, followed by an international spring tour.
We're creating a festival of dance films that deconstruct the body and experiment with elements within a specific site to challenge the possibilities of what dance can look like in video form.
Submit your film, and if your film is selected as the NBFF hashtag attention grabber, you are guaranteed an interview on this Dance Behind the Screen podcast. We hope we can interview you.
Yeah, the early bird deadline is September 30th. The fee is $15. The regular deadline is October 31st. The fee is $25.
If you want to submit your film, which we hope you do, you can click the link in our show notes or visit noboxdance.com. and search Film Festival, or look us up on Film Freeway, KNOWBOX Dance Film Festival. If you see a neon green play button as the logo, you're in the right place.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Taking care of yourself, right? So taking time for investing in yourself or filling up your own love tank, taking a break, right? Making sure you're eating the right things and getting the right rest and working out, and then also focusing on the positive, right? So even if you're not exactly where you want to be right now, can you find peace and presence and joy like exactly where you are in this moment and focus on that? So if you learn to be okay with where you are, all of the other stuff will take care of itself. So those are the two main things, like literally take care of yourself, your body and your mind and your spirit.
NoBox Dance presents Dance Behind the Screen, process production and social media. Hey knowers, welcome to our podcast. We are NoBox Dance, a social media-based company. We strive to say no to the box. We connect interdisciplinary art, technology, and artists to re-envision the process of art making and sharing.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Marthea.
And Azaria of Dance Behind the Screen podcast. And today we're speaking with Shatés L. Edwards of The Working Dancer.
She is the author of the Freelance Dancer's Roadmap and career articles published in Dance Magazine, The Dance Advantage, Dance North Texas, and Dance Mogul. She is the founder and CEO of The Working Dancer, which includes a blog, podcast, classes, and more. The mission of The Working Dancer works to empower artists to build their career and lives on their own terms. Shatés and I met while at Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas, pursuing our separate degrees in dance. And today, welcome to our podcast, Shatés.
Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. And to start off, how would you describe your career?
That's an interesting question. The first thought that came to my mind is fulfilling. But if you're looking for something more descriptive, I would definitely say, once upon a time, I kind of only identified as like a dancer. That was my main thing, dancer choreographer. And now I would say that my career is really just a really great, it's just so inclusive of who I am totally, right? So I will first and foremost always be like a dance artist. But I know now that, I'm also an educator and I'm also a writer, and all of my content that I kind of create great content around is kind of has a through line. But, now I get to do all of these really interesting and fulfilling things that I say completely, includes all of my work. So I don't know if that is answering the question the way that you intended it. But I would just say, definitely I would describe it as fulfilling, and then just kind of call myself, I guess, a content creator or a storyteller, or I think that's the through line that kind of binds all of this together.
Shatés, it's really interesting to hear how you describe yourself as a storyteller. I feel like that's so evident in in just your blog specifically. But we're a little bit more curious to kind of take it back a little bit further. Could you tell us about your process of creating The Working Dancer and tell us a little bit about, why did you create this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's not anything that I ever set out to do. I will say that I've always kind of had an entrepreneurial spirit. I grew up around like my parents trying different businesses, Mary Kay, or even different businesses that they had on their own. So I've just always been exposed to it. So before I started grad school, I had a business called Arts Life Entertainment, and it was very much arts based. It was kind of more events based, though. It was me kind of trying to expose artists to like allow them to grow their audience while also selling their work. So I used to produce these showcases, and I would produce master classes, and all of that kind of stopped when I started grad school. But I think where The Working Dancer came from specifically is that I actually TA'd career resources in grad school. And I had already had this kind of really extensive dance career before I started grad school. I had worked for about 7 years, like in LA and overseas, and done a ton of work before I even got there. And I think it was in career resources, I started having people ask me questions about how I got started and what I did to kind of launch my career. And because grad school was so intense, like literally working from 9 a.m. to like 10 p.m. every day, I didn't always have time to sit one-on-one with people. And it was interesting that I was getting questions inside of like school and then outside as well. So I just started writing responses down to different questions on the blog. And it kind of just stemmed from there. And I would share it with different people. And then I started teaching after grad school when I became a professor, kind of sharing some of that information in my curriculum and kind of tailoring even some of the things that I was teaching in class to what I was sharing on my blog to kind of help the dancers I was working with at the time to figure out things after college. So it kind of just stemmed from questions that I was getting. And then I started writing and started loving it. And it's kind of snowballed from there, honestly.
Wow, that's a very interesting pathway that you took. Now, when you said TA resources, were you working as a graduate student and you had other students coming to you, or was this part of your job to give career advice?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, Martha, as you know, career resources is like one of the required courses that you all took as undergrads at SAM. And so yes. I had, as my TA-ship, my teaching assistantship, we had different assignments. And that course was assigned to me literally at the last minute. It wasn't something that I even knew about. It was like I'm in the grad office working on my thesis, and one of the faculty members kind of walks by and like, hey, you know, Andy needs a TA. Can you do it right now? So sure, I'll do it. And absolutely fell in love with it. So it wasn't really a part of my the work that I was doing in that class because there was already a specific curriculum. But I fell in love with like sharing my story and helping others. Because side note, also, when I first started out in LA, pursuing my dance career, I was completely 100% clueless. So I had no idea what to do. The internet was around, but there wasn't a ton of advice. So I kind of fumbled my way through everything and figured things out on my own. And so what was exciting to me was to be able to write these things down and put them on paper for someone who was like my younger self when I first started out. So the questions that I got were, some of them were from some of the students within that class, but then just me being exposed to like still working in the Houston market and dancers in that community. I kind of just got questions from people wherever for some reason, not really sure why, but just, you know, kind of sparked, you know, The Working Dancer.
Shatés, would you say that most of your audience are people that like you see yourself as now, or how you were when you were first starting out, or how would you describe your audience or your tribe, the people you're connecting with?
That's a really, really, really good question. I could say that I feel like my audience has evolved with me. So when I first started, I was specifically targeting people who were like me when I was first starting out. And so I have all of that content on the website, right? So someone can figure out where they should get started, what they should be doing, and answer all of the questions that I think that I had. But then I feel like after a certain point, those people kind of have found their own way. And then also, in an attempt to reach out to those people who were just starting out, I reached out to a ton of educators. And so my tribe started to involve some of those people. So some of the people who were like, you know, my season as a professor, like those kind of have mingled in there. And now, because to be perfectly honest with you, or transparent, we're evolving to serve more people. So in the time that I've done the Working Dancer over the past couple of years, I've connected with creatives from all disciplines. And this content really applies to anyone who's a creative freelancer, honestly. So we're kind of opening up, you know, our messaging to include any creative. And now it kind of involves some of those people too. So we're kind of like a gumbo of artists.
You are listening to Navox Dance.
Can you tell our audience about the career materials that you offer and maybe why they're so valuable?
Yeah, so some of the things we're about to talk about are things that I was offering when I first started the blog and was trying to figure out basically how to monetize my messaging, how to turn like the blog into a business. So these things are now, we're moving more, I guess, towards products versus services that require like freelance. We're trying to make it more passive, essentially. So the career materials, though, are like, you know, your if this is the right thing, if we're not getting them confused with the professional materials. I think you mean like your resume and that type of stuff. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, we can talk about both of the materials that you really speak to, but let's start with the resumes.
Yeah, so all of that stuff is essential because it's all of your like marketing materials, right? It's the thing that you are showing your value on. It's what you talk about, where you talk about what you've done and what you can bring to the table as an artist or as a professional in whatever regard. So when it comes to us offering that early on, it was because, you know, just thinking about what we talk about in the classroom, if you're thinking about just studio spaces, not everyone kind of gets the opportunity to maybe take the career resources. Oftentimes, you know, dancers just kind of come from the studio. And then if they decide to pursue it professionally, it's kind of, you're just thrown out there and you're like, okay, now what? So I was trying to offer a way to just help people start with professional materials. Another thing that I saw when I was coming back from LA, like into Houston and working professionally, the level of professionalism I felt like wasn't always there. I saw so many variations of like headshots and resumes that weren't necessarily up to like a professional standard that I would see in LA, and having come from having an agent and knowing what, you know, those casting directors and people are looking for. And so I noticed that, you know, a lot of dancers didn't necessarily have that. And I think it was just exposure. It's not really, no one sets out to be unprofessional, right?
Right.
It's just you kind of don't know what you don't know. And so I felt like people should just know this is what you should be having when you're presenting yourself. You should have this type of headshot. It also kind of came from some of the mistakes that I made. My very first set of headshots were, you know, an epic fail. They were really beautifully done pictures, but they did not like brand myself as, they didn't brand me as a dancer. They were like kind of model comp cards. And that was really because I didn't know what to tell the photographer. I didn't really know what I was doing. So all of those things that I was offering early on so that dancers could, you know, kind of start out with a leg up with more professional materials than I had.
And I think that what you've created, Shatés, is just so innovative in and of itself, not just for artists, but like you said, for creatives as well. And I think it's also important for our audience to hear about like the failures you just talked about your headshots not being what you wanted in the beginning. I think that that's important to know it's okay. You have to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what's really great is that you're offering this platform digitally. And I'm curious, more specifically, I noticed on your website under Career Shop, you have all these other different resources. So I was hoping you could talk to us about those, perhaps the I Am Working Dancer, the workbook, or the business basics. Could you just talk to our audience a little bit about what those are and how they can access them?
Sure, absolutely. So I am absolutely in love with like online businesses. I think they're just the idea that you can create like this collection of services or products to sell and reach people all over the world. And that the overhead is so incredibly low. Like I'm just in love with the idea of an online business. And so again, I did not set out really with the intentions of creating one. But, after having a blog and like falling in love with it, I was kind of like, how could you not, right? How could you not try to get into that realm of things? And so when developing like the blog and even the podcast, I literally have been connecting with creatives everywhere, like people in India or in Germany or like Holland, literally everywhere. And so with time differences and just, living in different worlds, it just made more sense to reach more people with things that they could access whenever they're ready, right? Instead of me trying to have live events, I used to try to host kind of online workshops, where people could join in. And while they were kind of moderately successful, it just made more sense to kind of repurpose the content that I was doing so people could access it whenever. So the workbook came about for a way to make the book that I wrote more interactive. So I have the Freelance Dancers Roadmap, which basically kind of outlines how I got started in my career, all the fumbles I made, how I used to like go to auditions and cry and act like I never danced before. And just like all of the tips that I learned from getting started, or how I burnt out completely because I wasn't taking care of myself. And then I quit dance, and then, I didn't quit any, just like all of that stuff. So the workbook includes all of the tips from that book without necessarily like all of the story. So you can grab all of the tips really quickly and then work through them and apply them to your own life. So you can create a plan for networking, or create a plan for, preventing burnout, or create a plan for getting good headshots, just kind of things like that. And then the workbook actually is being used by a couple of educators for their classes in college classrooms. So that's been really exciting to see.
That is exciting.
And then the that I have kind of stem from like conversations like these that I've had with other professionals, like a friend of mine, Catherine, who's, started as a theater professional, now does bookkeeping for artists. And she came on and talked about like tax tips. And then someone else I met that has an online business for productivity gave time management tips. And then there's business basics for like starting an online business or whatever your endeavor might be. So just kind of all of that kind of stuff that people can access at their leisure.
Don't forget to say no to the box.
Shatés, I listened to a few of your podcasts, Soul Talk. It's a wonderful podcast. And you talked, I think it's in the second episode or so, about mindset. And I see that too on your website, talking about success and the importance of a mindset. So I'm just curious to kind of hear about how you navigate that, and to tying this into your social media. So on your Instagram, I've always loved all the inspirational, the quotes or tips that you share through Instagram. So I'm just curious, how do those tie together for you?
Good question. So I am in love with any type of personal professional development. Like I literally feed off of inspiration. So I'm always reading books, taking courses. I'm a firm believer in mentors and coaches. Like anything that I can do to become the next version of myself, I'm all for it. And so when I started to evolve past just kind of offering dance career tips, it just made sense for me to start talking about the things that have helped me evolve as a person and as a professional. And a lot of it also came from the fact that looking back over my career when I was in LA, a large portion of the challenges that I had were really from myself, like me holding myself back from not necessarily believing in myself, having low confidence, not knowing my worth, right? Things like that I have grown to overcome or have been aware of. And so part of it became me wanting to kind of encourage other dancers to recognize that early on, or to know their worth early on. So that's kind of where the inspirational quotes and messaging have come from. The mindset thing is just stems from the fact that everything that we do comes from what we believe about ourselves and what we're capable of doing. So mindset work is just so important for everything that we do. I can't even stress it enough. So I think it's just an important part of life. And I don't think that we will necessarily get the success that we want if we don't first have the proper belief system around it.
And I think it's just so exciting to hear you talk about it, because I know just we haven't connected and been able to talk in a while, but I feel like I've been able to see that in you just by following your website and your blog and your Instagram and Facebook. because I think it really is, as artists, it can be really hard and overwhelming, juggling all the things like you've mentioned and experiencing these hardships. So it's really great to hear you and also see just this authentic place that you're coming from, and you're really sharing your story and hoping that it can help other people.
And I agree, going off of that with this idea of your roadmap and this idea of burnout, do you have like a one tip that really kind of always surfaces that you can give our audience in kind of taking care of themselves mentally to avoid that burnout and to keep on the right track?
Oh my gosh. I could literally talk about this for days. One tip, I have two that come to mind.
Okay.
And I could just say that everything starts with you. Like everything starts with us. And so for me, my burnout was twofold. It was one, I wasn't taking care of myself physically, meaning like to make it in LA, I had an agent and auditions are during the day. So it's not, they're during business hours when castings take place. So I had to figure out how to work so I could still pay my bills. So I was working overnight, sometimes leaving work at 7:00 in the morning, going straight to an audition, and then trying to get a couple of hours of sleep and then going to class in the evenings because that's where your networking takes place, right? So you have to do that part. And then just not eating right. So I wasn't sleeping and I wasn't eating right. And it was just all bad, right? And then, so that was the physical part. And then the mental part was that all I was focusing on was the fact that I wasn't seeing the results as quickly as I wanted to. So I was focusing on the wrong thing too. So imagine like extreme fatigue and then also like just a negative outlook is just disastrous. That's just a combination for disaster. So that's what happened. I just got fed up. And what ended up happening is I moved from LA. I was like, I'm not dancing anymore. I didn't book Beyonce. It's over. I quit. Right. So I come back to Texas and I literally slept for a month. Literally for like a month, didn't do anything but sleep. And then I started working out, right? I cut sodas and sugar out of my diet and I started feeling like myself again. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm going to go take a class for fun, right? Quote unquote. And literally within a few months, I was like working more in Texas than I had like all 4 years of being in LA. So to take it back to your question, it's really about taking care of yourself, right? So it's taking time for investing in yourself or filling up your own love tank, taking a break, right? Making sure you're eating the right things and getting the right rest and working out, and then also focusing on the positive, right? So even if you're not exactly where you want to be right now, can you find peace and presence and joy like exactly where you are in this moment and focus on that? So if you learn to be okay with where you are, all of the other stuff will take care of itself.
You are listening to Navvox Dance.
Shatés, could you talk to us about how social media has influenced your career? So you're saying, it's not, you're surprised, I guess, at how many platforms you're on, but do you think that you've seen an influence on your career because of social media?
Absolutely. I think everybody has to be on social media these days. Because
why do you think so?
People are, I know even just from working in career development, like in education, like in higher education, as well as working in career development in the arts, like and professionally, that's where people are sourcing. They're now going there, right? First to look at their candidates. So employers are going to social media via like LinkedIn to look for professional candidates. And then casting directors, choreographers, all of that are going to Instagram or wherever the talent is to see basically their portfolios before they kind of entertain them any further. So it's a place where you are building your brand, where you're building visibility. You have to be on social media in some form these days.
Shatés, could you unpack that for us a little bit more, since you kind of were on the other side of things in terms of hiring and things like that, and your experience with that? What is it that people look for in terms of looking on people's social media?
They're looking for your story, like who you are as a person, what your message is, and what value you've added. So like what type of work you've done. So when it comes to your story, like, so what is the thing that you're saying about yourself over and over? What's the expertise that you bring? What's your voice about certain things? And then again, like I said, the work that you've done. And they're looking to see, you know, possibly if you could fit into the culture of what they're doing, but just to kind of get an idea of who candidates are as a person. A lot of times when it comes to like casting specifically these days, they're also looking for your following, to see like, you know, if you're an influencer. Unfortunately, that is part of like casting these days. Not always, but they're looking at that part too. But generally, you know, about your voice, about your work, and about, you know, kind of your visibility.
And I'm just really curious, how do you create the content for the working dancer? What's that process like?
Good question. So before, when I first started, it was in response to questions that I got. And then I started answering. If I didn't have any more questions outside of like me, I started talking about the things that I wish I had known when I first started. And then there was a period where I just was talking about like my life, like what I was going through. I think I put a piece in there about like anxiety, like and how that kind of steals like your joy and where you're going to. And then now I'm creating content specifically along the lines of success. So like the mantra that we have is believe, be taught, and begin. And that's something that I've had with me literally for over a decade. I don't know where it came from, but that's where success comes from, in my opinion. Like you have to have the right mindset. You have to believe, you have to be taught. So you have to, you know, figure out what you don't know and apply that. And you have to begin. You just have to take steps, take action over and over and over. And so now we create content that falls under those lines. Like it has to be about mindset, about learning something, or about taking action, and kind of try to stay within that.
Wonderful. And I wanted to take it back just a little bit to your talk of hiring and perspectives looking at your Instagram accounts. Do you recommend that dancers kind of have two Instagrams? So one is very strictly professional and almost like a digital resume, and then leave their at-home private one private per se, so that you only see the professional side of dance when they look at one of your Instagram accounts?
Yeah, that's another good question. I think that you don't have to have two accounts. I have two accounts because one is a professional, like a business presence.
Yeah.
Right? If it were just me as a freelancer, so if you think about somebody like Beyonce, where she is her business, then she is posting, right, her work. She's posting from concerts or images from concerts or images from events, but then she posts pictures with her husband or her family. Like dancers can absolutely do that. Weave like your professionalism into your personal life, which I'm a fan of. It's less work, honestly. If you can do it in a way that makes sense, right? So if you're talking about how this is the full you, completely encompasses who you are, then there's no need for two profiles.
Don't forget to say no to the box. Flash 4.
All right. Well, as we wrap up, we have something called our Flash 4 portion, where we ask our guests to answer 4 questions in a flash. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay,
Wait. What kind of flash? What's your definition of flash? Like really quickly?
So quickly, but if you feel the need to expound, you are free to do so. Okay. All right. Number 1, if you had to recommend a resource to our audience, what would it be? Book, podcast, someone to follow, a website, blog?
Oh my gosh. I when I saw this question, it was really difficult for me to answer because there's so many that I would recommend. There's so many books that I would recommend, from like Big Magic from Elizabeth Gilbert about like creative living, Beyond Fear. The Success Principles by Jack Canfield has like a million gazillion amazing success tips. The Alchemist is an incredibly inspiring kind of novel or kind of tale about fable, I guess I would say, about following your dreams and how each step of you following your dream, you kind of get what you need, like the universe provides what you need at that moment. All of those have been like just tremendous inspirational kind of things for me. And then obviously The Working Dancer, right?
So question 2, what was the first dance you saw?
So I actually started dance really young at like 3. So I was always around it and in it. But I think the first actual concert that I saw had to have been the Nutcracker. I remember seeing it really, really young. I had to be under 10 for sure. I only remember like images of different moments of the stage, but I definitely remember being there with my mom and kind of getting that experience at a young age.
Awesome. Number 3, do you think social media has a positive influence on the dance world? Yes or no?
Absolutely, because it's given access, right? It's given dance a voice to people who may not have had access to it before. You know, there's all kinds of conversations about the types of audiences that go see shows, and there's like socioeconomic kind of factors that go into all of that. Certain demographics or communities aren't always exposed to it. So it just gives it a voice to a wider audience, access, you know, who might not have had it before.
I'm glad you brought that point up, Shatés. I think that's really important to note that, yeah, it's giving access to a wider range of the socioeconomic background, if you will. Question number 4. What is your favorite social media platform?
If I had to choose one, I guess Instagram, because it's easiest and you can share videos and pics and then kind of share what you're thinking as well. I guess, yeah, if I had to choose that one.
Wonderful. So that wraps up our Flash 4 portion. And I just wanted to say thank you so much, Shatés, for sharing with us and for our audience all that you have done for the working dancer. It's a really innovative and wonderful resource. And
yes, it is.
We're just so excited that we got the chance to talk to you and to have you on our podcast. But could you share with our listeners your social media handles and your website and just how they could stay connected with you?
Absolutely. Would love to. So you can find everything, where we are and what we're all about at theworkingdancer.com. So all one word, no underscores or anything like that, theworkingdancer.com. There you'll find our social media handles as well. So everywhere we are, Instagram and Facebook is just going to be at The Working Dancer. And then if you go to like our IG, you'll also see my personal social media handle on that description as well. It's just I am Shatés. But if you start at theworkingdancer.com, you'll find everything that you need.
Great. And could you just, if you will, share about your podcast as well?
Yeah. So my podcast actually stems from the fact that I'm in love with behind the scenes stories. I love shows like Unsung and Being and Each True Hollywood Story, where people are kind of talking about how they got started and what mistakes they made or what failures. And so I just started reaching out to people that I knew and kind of asking for their specific story, especially when it comes to dance, because it's not something that we hear all the time. We kind of get a glimpse of where someone has ended up, like how they made it, but we don't know like what it took for them to get there. So I just kind of talk to dancers, not just dancers anymore. I'll talk to anyone actually who'll just share their story about like where they got started, what mistakes they made, what tips they can share, what they've learned from those mistakes and things of that nature. And I call it Soul Talk because it was originally kind of supposed to be a pun on like dancing, right? The soles of our feet, also with like souls of our beings. But now it's just kind of like more of a soulful conversation with people who I think are interesting.
And it's great. If people want to listen, where can they find Soul Talk?
Yeah. So we're on, again, theworkingdancer.com/podcast. And we're also on iTunes. There's a link to the iTunes podcast if you go to theworkingdancer.com.
Well, wonderful. Thank you again, Shatés, for such
thank you.
Insightful conversation about the process of starting your own career and everything like that.
Thank you, ladies, so much for having me. I love what you're doing as well. And best of luck to you in your endeavor and keep it up. And let me know if there's any type of questions you ever have or collaboration you want to do. I'd love to kind of talk about it.
We would love
Sounds
that.
Great.
Thanks, Shatés.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking your time to tune into Dance Behind the Screen, a bi-monthly interview series where we go behind the screen to question process, product, and social media. Be sure to follow us on social media at KNOW Box Dance. See you next time and don't forget to say no to the box.